The Young and the Restless kidnapping plot, horrifying mysteries and shocking revelations. Every episode of The Young and the Restless has its twists and turns, but none compare to the horrific kidnapping that takes place with Sharon and Phyllis. Both are held in an abandoned psychiatric facility called Havenhurst, and their confrontation with a dangerous kidnapper leaves viewers glued to the screen. Things get even more complicated and deadly when the true identity of the mastermind is finally revealed, leaving both Sharon and Phyllis in a state of utter confusion. Shocking revelation at first, Sharon and Phyllis can only imagine that their kidnapper is someone connected to the hospital or a former patient at Havenhurst. Sharon, always sharp and perceptive, had already thought of the possibility that the person behind the kidnapping was a doctor who had worked there, or perhaps a patient who had undergone severe psychological therapy. However, what they were about to face was something they could not have expected. At this point, the audience began to realize something that Sharon and Phyllis could not have imagined. The person behind this kidnapping was not someone from their past, but someone completely different, and no one suspected his identity. All suspicion fell on Ian Ward, a man who was once thought to have died in a terrible accident. Ian's death was one of the events that shocked the Genoa City community. But was Ian really dead? Surely Ian's survival was no coincidence. When he was found awake in an ambulance, gasping for air, people began to ask, how did Ian survive and why did he choose to return? It turned out that Ian had used a fake death trick to escape death, to deceive everyone that he was dead and could continue his revenge plots. Ian Ward, the revenge seeker. As revealed later, Ian was not actually the culprit in the kidnapping, but he was an indispensable factor in this plot. After being nearly destroyed by Victor's previous attack, Ian returned with a single goal: revenge. Victor's attempt to kill Ian only spurred him on to carry out more heinous plots. However, in this situation, although Ian continued to recover and return to Genoa City, he did not seem to be the one behind the kidnapping of Sharon and Phyllis. This leads to the emergence of another character, one that Billy Abbott will soon discover in the March 10th episode. After eliminating Ian as a suspect, Billy suspects that there is another crazy lurking in the shadows. It is Billy who first theorizes that the culprit may be a lunatic with deep connections to the place where Sharon and Phyllis are being held, Havenhurst. Clues about the new kidnapper, a lunatic and a horrifying plot. Havenhurst, an abandoned psychiatric facility, is where Sharon and Phyllis are being held. The dark and lonely environment makes any suspicions about who is behind the kidnapping all the more terrifying. Billy, with his knowledge, begins to suspect that the kidnapper may be someone obsessed with revenge or even have a deep connection to the place itself. With his keen analytical skills, Billy begins to deduce that the culprit could be a man with dementia who may have had some connection to the facility. This becomes even more plausible when Sharon begins to think that their kidnapper could be a doctor or a former patient at Havenhurst. This connection makes things even more complicated. The nature of Sharon and Phyllis's imprisonment in such a place is not random. Perhaps the kidnapper has an ulterior motive, a revenge plan that Sharon and Phyllis could not have foreseen. Who is the kidnapper? Final predictions. Although Ian is not the culprit, his shadow still hangs over the case. Could a madman, someone with some connection to Havenhurst, be behind this horrific kidnapping? One of the strongest theories is that the kidnapper could be an unrevealed figure from Sharon or Phyllis's past who has a deep grudge against them. Other theories suggest that the kidnapper is someone who had a relationship with Victor Newman. If Victor tried to kill Ian, could Ian be the mastermind behind this brutal revenge? However, this plot twist has yet to be revealed, and viewers are waiting for the shocking surprise that The Young and the Restless will bring. Regardless, the kidnapping of Sharon and Phyllis will certainly not stop there. Unsolved mysteries, tangled relationships, and a deadly revenge plot will have many unexpected developments. Sharon and Phyllis are in a life-or-death battle, not only to escape the shackles but also to decode the dark relationships that surround them. The Young and the Restless has brought viewers a dramatic and surprising plot, when Sharon and Phyllis's kidnapping is not only a fight for survival but also a mysterious chase. With the revelations about Ian Ward and Billy Abbott's predictions about a lunatic, this story will certainly develop in shocking directions. Viewers are facing a big challenge: who is really behind this kidnapping? The answer may make everyone shudder. In a series of dramatic and mysterious episodes, The Young and the Restless always knows how to create attractive situations and attract the attention of viewers. One of the recent surprising stories is the character Alan Lauron, with unusual changes in behavior and relationships, making viewers ask the question, is the person we call Alan really Alan? Is he Martin Lauron, Alan's twin, who everyone believes died after falling from a balcony in France? This story is not simply a change of identity but goes deeper. It explores complex psychological issues and mysterious plots surrounding a character who may suffer from a mental illness. This role-playing not only makes the character Alan different but also raises a wave of doubt in the hearts of viewers, when we begin to doubt his motives. Meeting Sharon and the psychological story begins. The story begins when Alan meets Sharon, whom he approaches for a seemingly reasonable reason. He wants to interview her as part of his psychological research. Alan explains that he is writing a book and wants to collect real-life stories to enrich his research. However, from the very beginning, the viewer can sense that something is not right about Alan. Although he appears polite and professional, there is an odd element to his demeanor and gestures that is difficult to explain easily. While psychological interviews usually bring a sense of comfort and safety to the participants, Alan makes Sharon feel insecure and skeptical about his motives. This causes Sharon, along with the viewer, to begin to think about the truth behind this encounter. As an expert in analyzing human behavior, Sharon begins to notice signs of something wrong with Alan's attitude and gestures, and begins to suspect what he really wants. But if we look at Alan from the perspective of a person with mental problems, can things be explained differently? Could Alan be dealing with psychological problems that he cannot control, leading him to exhibit strange and irrational actions? Martin Lauron theory, the invasion of another person. One of the most intriguing and convincing theories related to this story is the theory of Martin Lauron, Alan's twin brother. We know that Martin had a serious accident in France, fell from a balcony and was presumed dead. But what if Martin is not dead? And if he actually survived, how could he use such a reincarnation strategy to carry out his plan of revenge? Surely, Martin's fake death would not have been easy to detect. If he could disguise himself as Alan Lauron, a character who already had an identity and connections to the Abbott family, he could easily exist in the shadows without anyone suspecting anything. And the fact that he was able to conduct interviews as part of a psychological study only adds to the suspicion that Alan was actually Martin looking to exploit people, especially Sharon, to serve his own purposes. This becomes even more plausible when we look at the event of Alan entering the Abbott mansion with Tracy Abbott. This scene not only caused surprise but also created a sense of strangeness as Alan acted as if he had never been there before. Why such a drastic change? How could someone who was once part of the Abbott family act like a stranger? It is possible that Alan is actually Martin, who is using his brother's identity to carry out a shady plan. And while Martin survived the accident, the psychological trauma he faced may have caused him to act out of control. If this is the case, then all of Alan's actions over the years may have been part of Martin's grand plan to take everything from the Abbott family, while also cleverly exploiting his own mental instability to hide his schemes. Complicated psychology, mental illness and sophisticated tricks. The story does not stop at revealing Alan's identity. If we look at the matter from a psychological perspective, we can see that Martin, although a person with a very clear reason for revenge, may also be a person with a severe mental disorder. His ability to assume an identity and engage in situations as a normal person could be a sign of a deep-seated personality disorder, where Martin believes that hiding his identity is the only way to survive. Psychology suggests that people with personality disorders, especially those with obsessive or manipulative tendencies, can be difficult to identify and very clever at hiding their true nature. Martin's disguise as Alan could be part of his way of dealing with complex psychological issues that he cannot deal with rationally. It could also be that he is living in a world of his own, where the dissociation between reality and fantasy has made him unable to distinguish between what is real and what is not. This pathology is not only part of the identity change narrative, but also an important element in building relationships between characters on The Young and the Restless. Alan's actions will become more and more unpredictable, and viewers will be faced with difficult questions. Who is Martin Lauron really, and what consequences will he bring to the Abbott family? Conclusion: mysteries and difficult psychology. As the story progresses, we can realize that the mysteries in The Young and the Restless are not simply a change of identity, but also a deep study of complex psychological issues. Martin Lauron, or Alan, may be a mentally unstable person, and his actions are not random but part of an internal struggle to regain control. Can the Abbott family uncover the truth before it is too late? And can they face a person with so much mystery and danger? This is sure to be a dramatic and unexpected story, which only The Young and the Restless can exploit perfectly. The Young and the Restless, Martin Lauron and Extreme Hypnosis, a strange psychological game in The Young and the Restless. Each character has a deep story and mysteries interwoven into their lives, and nothing can attract more attention than the strange story of Martin Lauron. Although he was thought to be dead after an accident in France, everything changed when Martin gradually revealed himself under a new identity, Alan Lauron, his brother. Alan's disappearance was a sign of deep conspiracies, and now, when Martin has disguised himself as Alan, he not only surprises everyone in the Abbott family but also uses sophisticated tactics to manipulate the psychology of those around him, especially Ashley Abbott. Who is Martin and his identity change? At first, Martin's disguise as Alan led many to believe that it was simply a mistake. Martin, who was presumed dead after falling from a balcony in France, may not have disappeared completely. His survival in this secret began to make sense when he entered the Abbott mansion and acted as if he had never been there before. This left not only Ashley but also those around him bewildered and unable to understand why someone who had once been part of the family would act as if he were a stranger. What's even more bizarre is that Martin didn't simply impersonate his brother. He also used sophisticated tactics to manipulate everyone around him, especially Ashley Abbott. During a tense conversation with Ashley, Martin used extreme hypnosis tactics to make her feel like she was being controlled. Martin's words, the stories he created, seemed to be more than just a casual exchange, but a way for him to put Ashley in a more manipulative state. And this was just the beginning of the psychological games Martin was playing. This can be an extreme and bizarre form of therapy where the person performing it believes they are helping the captives while in reality creating a dramatic nightmare. Sharon, who is experienced and has a sharp intellect, can see that the actions around her are not random. She begins to realize that the purpose of their kidnapper may be to prove how smart he is, wanting to create a mystery and a huge show to get everyone's attention. One of the interesting details in the March 10th episode is that Sharon begins to suspect that their kidnapper is not just simply holding them captive but actually wants them to become part of a big psychological game. Could their kidnapper be someone like Martin, who is always trying to prove himself and create a mysterious curtain that everyone has to figure out? Martin and the psychological history of Sharon and Phyllis. With Alan, or Martin, really, doing research for a book and intending to interview Sharon, it is clear that Martin has spent a great deal of time researching the people around him, especially Sharon and Phyllis. It is hard to imagine that one person would have the time and attention to research all the information about Sharon and Phyllis, but Martin seems to have done so. He is able to know the details of every step of their lives, even the complex relationships between Sharon and Phyllis. This includes the events they attended, the fights they had, and the songs that were played during those events. One of the important details that Martin may have researched is the event where Sharon and Phyllis once faced each other in a fight. Knowing what song was playing at the event was not a coincidence, but an important detail that Martin used to show that he knew well about Sharon and Phyllis's past. This shows that Martin is not just a kidnapper but someone with a thorough plan and a sophisticated psychological strategy to manipulate those around him. The world of psychological games and truth uncovered as Sharon and Phyllis gradually realize that everything around them is not a simple situation. They begin to find ways to overcome Martin's psychological manipulation. However, with the extreme tactics that Martin has applied, their struggle is not only a physical battle but also a tense mental battle. Ever since Sharon suspected that there was a deeper purpose behind their captivity, she and Phyllis became more and more wary of Martin's every move. Will they be able to uncover the truth before Martin achieves his goal? Or will they be drawn into a painful psychological game that Martin has prepared? This story is not only a struggle for survival but also an exposure of the darkness in the human psyche, where mysteries and mind games can invade the minds of the participants. The Young and the Restless has always known how to combine complex psychological elements and drama to create unexpected situations. The appearance of Martin Lauron, who disguises himself as Alan, and the psychological manipulation tactics he applies has completely changed the atmosphere of the story. While Sharon and Phyllis have to face Martin's imprisonment and mind games, viewers become more and more eager to discover whether they can escape these psychological traps and find the truth behind all these mysteries. The suspenseful and unexpected plot twists are always subtly interwoven, taking the audience on a challenging journey. One of the current stories that is attracting strong attention is the strange kidnapping of Sharon and Phyllis, the two characters who are confronted by a mysterious person who not only holds them captive but also engages them in a risky psychological game. The person behind all these developments does not seem to be someone familiar to Sharon and Phyllis, but a character with a complex psychological past and a crazy plan to test the limits of extreme treatment methods. The clues revealed, a story of criminal psychology. The situation that Sharon and Phyllis are facing is not a simple kidnapping. Instead, this is an extreme psychological game, an experiment built on the foundation of perverted psychological theories. And what makes things more complicated is the appearance of the kidnapper, who is not necessarily someone who knows Sharon and Phyllis well, but simply someone who is willing to invest effort in studying human behavior and finding extreme ways to carry out a challenging psychological game. Throughout the story, it seems that Martin is trying to prove that his extreme methods can be effective in curing people like Sharon and Phyllis. For Martin, this is not just a simple psychological game, but a way to test his psychological treatments. The so-called therapy that he applies is not to heal but to control and manipulate the psychology of the subject. Perhaps, Martin wants to prove that he can create an unpredictable environment, where Sharon and Phyllis will no longer be able to distinguish between reality and illusion. A crazy psychological game, therapy or manipulation? What makes this story so scary and special is the ambiguity between what is called therapy and psychological manipulation. Martin may believe that he is performing an extreme type of therapy, like a form of human behavior modification through strong psychological effects. However, for Sharon and Phyllis, it is the exact opposite. Everything becomes a nightmare as they gradually realize that they are not only being held captive, but also being manipulated and lost in their own thoughts. Sharon, with her strong will and awareness, will begin to realize that everything around her is not random. She gradually understands that the kidnapper does not just want to hold her and Phyllis captive, but is actually creating an elaborate, psychologically manipulative performance. This game is not just about making Sharon and Phyllis feel scared, but also about testing their tolerance for the extreme methods that Martin has developed from his own bad experiences. This puts Sharon and Phyllis in an unpredictable situation. They are not just victims of a normal kidnapping, but manipulated subjects in a psychological game that they cannot control. The world around them becomes blurry, and the worry that they might lose control of reality becomes greater. Kidnapper clues, a former mental patient. So who is really behind all this? The answer could be a former mental patient who has undergone faulty therapy in the past and is now applying what he learned in a cruel experiment on Sharon and Phyllis. This explains why the kidnapper doesn't need to know much about Sharon and Phyllis's lives, but simply spends time studying them, finding elements that can manipulate their psychology and using them in his game. Unlike normal kidnappers, the person behind this kidnapping is not simply after wealth or power. His goal is much deeper, which is to prove his intelligence through a psychological performance whose complexity can only be understood by the participants. And this is the factor that makes it difficult for Sharon and Phyllis to escape the kidnapper's control. They are not only imprisoned but also drawn into a game where their every move is monitored and controlled.